Okay, we ready? Well, let's go. You weren't given your children by accident. God chose you specifically to be their father. Welcome to Dad on Purpose, presented by Daddy Up, where we learn to reflect the heart of Jesus in our homes and protect the next generation through faith, presence, and love. I'm Jason Jones, and together we're choosing to be Dad on Purpose. All right, so here we are. We're at episode 2. If you listen to the first episode, I explained the origin of Dad on Purpose, of the podcast. But I also made mention in that episode of Daddy Up, and that's kind of like where everything started. So I want this episode to focus on the origin of Daddy Up. I want to go this route because, again, I want to give anyone who's listening the understanding of what drives me, of what motivates me. Like I said in episode 1, I absolutely love and adore being a father. All right. There is no better job in the world, no harder job in the world, but also no better job. Right. But there are a lot of things that I struggle with as a father. And struggle out of struggle is where Daddy Up itself was started. So I want this episode to kind of focus on where I was in the moment and what came out of that. So, with that being said, we'll get started here. So, Daddy Up, like I said in the first episode, it's an organization that I started. And you know what? I'm just I'm gonna be honest. I said in the first episode that Daddy Up was an organization that was intended to inspire fathers. And it was, right? Like that's the truth. It genuinely was and started in order to inspire fathers, right? But there's another kind of motivating factor behind that. And that was to sell some t-shirts, right? Like I created, well, let me go back a little bit. When I became a father, I had so much joy, I had so much pride. And there were some men who I just didn't feel had the same kind of pride and joy for being a father. I've watched some men who I deeply respected become fathers, and that pressure of being a father, it crumbled them and they ran. They ran from their responsibility. So I viewed the fact that I wasn't running from my responsibility as a skill that I had that maybe I could impart to some other people, some other, fathers who were in the same situation. So I created a logo, and the logo, I was like, yo, this is a dope logo. Like I can throw this on some shirts. I can make some money. And as you'll see when I get into the story here, I just viewed it as a way where I could sell some t-shirts and hopefully provide for my family. And I say all this before I start because I want to be honest, right? And I don't want to make it seem like the only reason that I started doing anything was because I wanted to inspire fathers, right? Like, no, I wanted to make some money too. I mean, that's just being real. Now it morphed, it turned into something different, but initially that was the intention. I want to inspire fathers, but I also needed to make some dollars. All right. So that's just real. So Daddy Up started, like I said, it came out of struggle. So I'm just going to set the mood here for you a little bit. My wife and I, like I said in the first episode, we have 4 children. Daddy Up started few days before we had Ruby, our second child, our second daughter. My wife was about 3 to 5 days away from giving birth. She had a C-section with our first daughter, Brooklyn, and so we knew we had scheduled pregnancies. Every one of our children was, or after Brooklyn, was scheduled. Like, you're going to come in on this day. We're going to do surgery. Boom, child's going to be there. It wasn't like, oh, my water broke. Take me to the hospital. It wasn't anything like that. So we knew when the baby was going to be coming, right? So I remember I was in the car. I was on the highway and I was driving to my wife's doctor because I had to drop off some paperwork for disability so we could, get some money through the state. We were living in Jersey at the time. I was on 295 on the way. And I was in between jobs at the time. So this was a very important drive. There was a lot riding on this, right? Because I had to get the papers to the doctor so they could fill them out so we could submit them to the state so we could start getting some disability money. And again, being in between jobs, I wasn't providing anything. And I think between the two of us, we had maybe $15, right? Maybe $15. And that's like if we pull all the cushions off and we start grabbing all the change out of the couch, maybe $15. All right. So I'm on the way. I'm in the car by myself. I'm in the car on the way, and I hear a loud boom. Wheels start shaking, the car is shaking all over the place. I start seeing smoke come from under the hood, and I pull over to the side of the road. Now, I'm somebody who, if you know anything about me, you know that I have some experience when it comes to driving and messing up cars, whether it be through accident or whatever. I have a history, right? So I knew that what I was going through at the moment with this car, I could tell by the signs that the car was giving me that this was a big issue, right? This was either a blown engine or whatever it was. We're talking thousands of dollars in order to get this fixed. And we only had one car. And I remember I pulled over to the side of the road and this fear and this panic just overtook me of, oh man, like I don't have a job. My wife is out of work right now. I'm on the way to go get like some paperwork signed for disability, but it's whatever that is not going to cover whatever we have going on here, and it's not coming in like the next couple hours when I need it in order to get this car fixed. We got a serious problem here. Again, we already had one daughter. We're a few days away from having a second daughter, and again, this fear and this panic set in of you're the dad. You're supposed to be the one providing. What are you going to do? How are you going to take care of this? You don't have any answers. And I remember I'm sitting there and, I'm crying, right? Because I'm just like, I'm mad, but I'm sad and I'm questioning myself. And I remember I looked in the rearview mirror and tears streaming down my face and all these things. And I looked in the rearview mirror and asked myself, how did you get here? What kind of bum, what kind of loser are you that you've gotten to this point where you're a few days away from having a baby and you can't provide not only for yourself, but you can't provide for the child you've already had. You can't provide for the wife that you have. Like you ain't nothing, right? And this is the pressure that I'm talking about that I've seen other men succumb to, right? This is the pressure that I'm talking about right here. And if you're a father, if you've gone through anything that's tough and that's rough, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And I'm sitting there and I don't have any answers for myself, but I'm looking myself in the mirror, just completely disgusted with the man that I am and the man that I've become. And I didn't realize it at the time, but through reflection and through, telling this story and just thinking on it, I was mad not only at myself, but I was mad at God, right? Because I'm like, yo, I'm not a bad person. Why are you punishing me like this? Why can I never seem to get ahead? Like, why is this my path? Right? Like, why do you hate me so much? And I remember in that moment in that car there, for some reason I flashed back to this experience that I had with my dad, maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 years earlier, where I was about 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there. And my dad and I, we were in the car, ironically, on the same highway that I'm pulled over on the side of, right? On the same highway. And I remember being in the car with him. And again, I flash back to this and I remember this experience where I said to my dad, well, let me start again. My dad was a boxer. For all accounts, an extremely good boxer. He never went pro, but he was really good. I remember people would come up to us when we would be out somewhere and be like, hey, aren't you Pepper Jones? Man, I used to watch you fight, and man, you were good in the way you did. People would recognize him, right? So I knew that my dad had some notoriety, at least locally, for being a boxer. Family and friends would all tell stories about how good he was and all these things. And at the time of this experience that I had with him, I was just starting to like really understand sports, the different levels, pro, amateur, and all these different things. And I remember I said to my dad, I looked over, just me and him in the car, and I looked over and I said to him, I was like, "Hey, Dad, why didn't you go pro?" All right, and because I want to know like what happened, like why aren't we rich? Like if you were that good, right? Like why didn't you become pro and get millions or whatever it was? Like why aren't we there? What happened? Knowing my dad, right? My dad always was about the moments, right? He understood the magnitude of moments and what the right answer could do versus what the wrong answer could do, right? And I remember my dad took a deep breath and he was like, and I'm sure in his mind he was like, okay, this is one of those moments where I got to give him a good answer to help carry him as a man, right? And I remember he took a deep breath and he was thoughtful and he looked over to me and he was like, "Son, I was in a fight in a match, in boxing match, and a guy threw a punch and the tape wasn't all the way around his glove. He had like a trail of tape and he threw a punch and the tape kind of it cut me on my eyelid. In all For all intents and purposes, it was a paper cut, right? But a serious paper cut. And I remember my dad, he had if he closed his eyes, you could see, I can't remember if it was his right or his left eye. I believe it was his left eye, but you could see the stitches in his eyelid if he closed his eye. And so he explained why he had those stitches. He's like, guy threw a punch and the tape cut me real deep on my eye. He was like, it was a bad cut, blood was everywhere, had to get stitches. And he was like, at the time, your mother was pregnant with your sister, and I couldn't keep on as an amateur. I had to do what I had to do as a man to take care of your mother, your sister, and eventually you. So I know in his mind, what he's saying to me is, dude, I had to be a man, right? I had to man up. I couldn't keep on following these boyish dreams, these childhood dreams of mine, right? Like my life came to a crossroad and I had to man up, right? That's what he's trying to convey to me, right? Now, I didn't realize how I took that internally until, years later. But basically, the way that I took that was, life is going to get really rough at some point for you as a man. And you're going to come to some sort of a crossroad and you're going to have to make a decision whether you want to follow the dreams that you have for yourself or whether you got to step up and you got to man up and you got to do what you're supposed to do to take care of the ones who you love the most. Now, again, that's the way that I took it internally. Also, what I did was I put a clock on myself, right? Where I thought, well, I better figure out what I want to do because at some point life's going to get rough and I better have this thing figured out so I don't have to make the same decision that my dad made. So, and again, this isn't anything that I'm thinking at the time. This is just things that I realized later on as I unpack this. So the clock that I put on myself was graduation, right, from high school. I think my parents knew. My parents, like, I'm smart, right? Like I'm not stupid by any stretch of the imagination. But I never really cared about school. I didn't really apply myself very much. So my parents knew I wasn't going to college, right? I just didn't have the grades to get into college. And I knew for the same thing, like I don't want to do that, right? So the clock that I kind of created for myself was high school graduation. You better have it figured out by the time you graduate high school because it's going to get rough, it's going to get ugly, so you better know what you want to do. So high school was getting ready to end. I graduated when I was 17. Now at 17, you tell me how many kids out there know exactly what they want to do for the rest of their life, right? Not many. And I was one of them. Graduated high school, had no idea what I wanted to do, had no idea what my future was going to hold. But again, there's this thing inside of me through this experience that I had with my dad where I was like, yo, dude, you got to figure it out. Like, you got to do something. And what I decided to do was, well, I'm gonna just get a job. All right. I'm gonna graduate high school and I'm just gonna get a job. I didn't know there wasn't any specific field I was going into. It was just get a job. Now, little caveat to the story. I've always had this chip on my shoulder where I wanted to be the best in the world at whatever I was doing, right? The chip on my shoulder came from just wanting to prove people wrong. I've struggled with my weight my entire life. I've always been a fat kid. Like I said, I didn't really apply myself too much in school. People never really took me serious or viewed me as somebody with any substance, right? So there's always been this chip on my shoulder of like, I just want to prove people wrong. I just want to shut them up because they have no idea how big the heart is that beats inside of this chest, right? And so I've always had this want and this desire to be the best in the world at something. So when I decided that I was going to get a job, that came back up. And I was like, you know what? Whatever job I get, I'm going to be the best in the world. No one is going to see me coming. I'm going to go in, I'm going to dominate, I'm going to take things serious, and I will be a force to be reckoned with. People will recognize me. They're going to understand. And eventually, I'm going to own whatever company I'm working for. So that was my mindset going into my first job. So, I got a job. And again, the thought was, let me just dominate. Right. So I got a job. And that's exactly what I did. I went in, I dominated. I was really good. First a few months went by, and I was getting recognized by people, was getting accommodations, or not accommodations, but commendations, or whatever. You know the word I'm trying to say. I'm getting recognized for my performance, right? And I thought, I'm on the road. I'm on the way. Here we go. It's time. This is happening. Look at me being the best in the world at something, right? Or at least on my way to be. And then something happened, and I lost the job. Right? All right. Small setback. No big deal. I'll just get another job, and I'll go in with the same mindset, and I'll do that, which is exactly what I did. I got another job, and I went in, and in the first few months, yo, this kid is really something. Like we may have to make him a manager, and it's going. And then something else happened, and I lost the job. I got a new job, something happened, lost it. Got a job, lost a job, got a job, lost a job, got a job, lost a job, until I'm on the side of the highway with a broken down car, with one kid already here, with another one coming in a couple days, with a wife who's looking at me like, how are we going to get this taken care of? And I'm looking at myself in the mirror with tears streaming down my face, asking myself, why aren't you any good? Why don't you have anything? Why are you such a loser? And I realized in that moment that that experience that I had with my dad, it wasn't about asking him, why didn't he go pro? And the way that I took it wasn't about having something figured out. What I realized in that moment was that I watched my dad give up on a dream. I watched him, I don't want to say settle, because my dad did exactly what he was supposed to do in order to take care of his family. So he didn't settle, right? He made the decision for him that in the moment was the best decision that he could make. But what it showed me was that he gave up on his dream. He didn't follow, right? And again, I'm not bashing my father at all, so please don't take it like this. But he didn't follow his dream. And as children, we tend to do what we see and not what we're told. My father could tell me all day long what to do, and he did. He would tell me all the moves that I should make in order to be successful. But because I didn't watch him do it himself, I followed what he showed me and not what he told me. And I realized in that moment right there that I didn't want my kids 30 years later to be stuck on the side of the road with a broken down car, looking at a mirror in themselves, or at themselves in the mirror, questioning everything about themselves. And it's up for me in this moment to step up to the plate and really do what I'm supposed to do and follow this dream. So that's what I did. That's where Daddy Up was started. It was about, I find so much pride and so much joy in being a father, and I'm going to chase this thing. I'm going to inspire men. I'm just going to be the best dad in the world. And if I can teach some other men how to do it along the way, if I can kind of share this pride that I have for this role that I've been blessed with, then that's what I'm going to do. And that's where Daddy Up started. It came from a moment of struggle, a moment of confusion, a moment of weakness, but it blossomed into something so beautiful. It came from the mud, but it grew out very beautifully. So that's what Daddy Up is. And again, I say that I share this story because I really want people to understand that I've struggled with a lot as a father, struggled with a lot as a man, but I keep showing up every single day. I don't run from this responsibility as a father. I don't run from the responsibility as a provider, as a protector, and any other kind of role you want to give me. Do not run from it. I stand here firm, 10 toes down every single day, waiting for what's coming. And sometimes it punches me in the face, but sometimes it gives me a hug. And that's what being a father is. So, again, that's where Daddy Up was started. Again, I just wanted to share, that experience and that story to just kind of get across who I am and who I'm trying to become. So, with that being said, that's episode 2. We're at the end here. So, I'm going to say, just like I did in the first episode, I thank you. I thank you for being here. If you've made it to the end of this episode, thank you sincerely. This is intended to be a place where we grow as men, where we share what we struggle with, where we share our vulnerability, we protect each other, and we grow as fathers. One of my favorite sayings, and you'll hear me say it all the time if you listen long enough, is that a rising tide raises all ships. And I'm trying to raise the tide. I'm trying to bring as many people along as possible. I'm trying for all of us to become better as men and better as fathers at the same time. So I thank you for joining me today. And again, remember, your presence is powerful. Your role is sacred. And God chose you for this calling. Fatherhood is not easy, but it's holy work. Keep learning, keep loving, and keep leading your family in faith. Until next time, be dad on purpose.